For those of you who are keen to take a closer look through the full course, that's what this video is all about. Before we take the guided tour through the full course though, I just want to have a quick look at the survey results. When I wrote the survey, it was before I'd started writing the content. I was kind of surveying people to get a feel for whether what I thought was important resonated with potential participants. So I've got the spreadsheet of the results here. So what you've got is all the submissions going down, but the red numbers are the average. Not surprisingly, the most popular one was participants wanting strategies for surviving the early months of teaching. Strategies that make sense and that are easy to follow and that work. All of the strategies that I use in any of my courses are very easy to follow, very feet on the ground stuff. The next are the 4.3s. For this one, we're talking about the course painting a vision of what I should be aiming for as a teacher long term, a vision of what an engaged learning environment looks like, what my role would be in such a learning environment and how to work towards it. Very happy that that scored extremely highly because I think that is one of the most important things in teaching. And this is certainly a very strong focus of the course. Another 4.3 is here, how my personality affects my teaching and how I can best harness my personality as a teacher. Because I think that's really important. And yes, we certainly cover that in the course. I'm also delighted that the idea of focusing on student agency, of students taking responsibility for their learning, owning their learning, the fact that it's rarely discussed in education circles, the fact it kind of flies in the face of some of the latest trends in education. I think it's one of the most important things we should aim for as a teacher. Now here's a 4.2. How can I break a negative cycle of feedback with a class? In other words, where I'm repeatedly in a battle with the class so that I can create a more positive, engaged learning environment. So there were two questions similar. This one was about students and this one was about the whole class. So very happy that those scored highly. And yes, again, we have a focus on that. We'll just have a look at a couple of 4.1s. Stories of lived teaching experience from experienced educators. Well, there's certainly a fair bit of that. This one here, conundrums such as, a challenging class needs me to be upbeat and positive, more so than any other class. However, challenging classes tend to force me to be downbeat, serious, and often negative. This makes my task as a teacher more difficult than it needs to be. What can I do about this? This is one of the biggest conundrums, I think, in teaching. And yes, we talk about that. And do one more, this 4.1 here. A common mistake is to assume that a student's behaviour is the student's. And again, we talk about this. This was a major revelation that I had later in my teaching career. And that is also an important little tidbit in the course. So, very happy that, well, pretty much everything rated highly, but there was some affirming feedback that this course is what people are looking for. So that's the survey. Let's now look at the actual course. Now, this is the edit mode, but this is the best way to look at the contents, and this is what the customer sees. So if I have to look at a page, I'll go over here. But for the contents, getting started, the vision as a teacher, you would have seen some of this in the free module, the 12 mistakes you would like to make unless you happen to do this course. So the first couple, too hard on yourself, prevention or cure. See, the problem with most student management tips is that they're talking about a cure, but really we need to go for prevention. This course, the number one course for early career teachers, is really more about prevention. There is a bit of cure to it as well, but if we can set things up so as kids aren't misbehaving, then that's the ultimate management. Okay, the tedious stuff, lesson planning, aims and objectives. I had to think a fair bit about how I was going to cover this because I have never towed the company line on lesson planning and aims and objectives. I actually asked a whole lot of, in a Facebook group, I asked teachers about their lesson planning. So in 3.1, feedback from teachers, yeah, this is what people said. So you can have a look at that. It's quite interesting. And then this is my take. I sort of put forward a very reasoned argument as to what's really important about planning, what the difference between aims and objectives are and how to tackle it and where to spend your time. You should find that pretty useful. There's some other more traditional nuts and bolts on lesson planning. Then we get into student agency or students owning their learning, how to plan for it, some more mistakes here. All of these mistakes, you can read them and think, well, that's a pretty simple mistake, but to turn it around it brings a significant result. Number 4, lesson delivery. Now, this one here, wait, what? There's no section on student management? Well, that's because everything in here really leads towards student management or lays a foundation for student management. Lesson structure is, or poor lesson structure is probably the number one cause of problems in the classroom. Now, this section here, 4.4 to 4.7, improving your lesson delivery. This is so powerful. There's a thing on being observed. In these three, I'll give you specific strategies that you can work on yourself to radically improve the amount of power you have in your classroom by changing the way you deliver what you say. This is so powerful. You'll probably not see this in any teacher training anywhere, but this is really important stuff. Voice training, there's a couple of videos here which are so simple to follow. Lesson delivery, this is also about the same thing, the way you can change your phrases and commands or think about what you're doing, and you'll find things that you're not doing as well as you could. So this section here is brilliant. Oh, my class is turning on me. There's a little bit of insight there. A couple more mistakes: poor lesson structure, over focus on problem students. And strategies for teaching, we talk a little bit about direct instruction and the good and the bad of that. Something about student-centered learning, which I think is really important if it's done well. A thing about learned helplessness. There's an article here that you can spend 2 hours implementing ideas from. It's fantastic. Diagnostic interactions is kind of my term that I use to explain an important aspect, particularly with math, science type subjects. And there's an article there. Something on assessment, another couple of mistakes. There's a really good questioning technique in there. Beware of too much teacher-centered instruction. This is where the vision really starts to happen. Well, let's stop talking down to kids. There's a thing on rapport, some tips. This is also a couple of stories here I tell that are embarrassing. And I tell them because it would have been so easy not to do what I did here. And I don't want you to make these mistakes. Transparency with your consequences or punishments that you dish out to kids. Are they punishments or are they consequences? It's important to know this. Praise to manage students. You might have a class that is unruly. They're kind of out of control. They're really hard work. Well, here's a strategy that you can use to turn this situation around. There's a few videos involved in this particular section. Turning around a negative cycle of feedback, well, that's something that people asked for. There it is. Human flourishing. This is a video by Brad Fuller. When I started talking with him on video, I had no idea we were going to get into this terrain. I'd never heard of this term before, but this is mind-blowing stuff. This is big picture vision. And if you can get a bit of this into your head about what's possible, then you could become an extraordinary teacher. 2 more mistakes. Too much praise. It's sort of the counter to this one. And secondly, being too serious. Then we have a little section on control. What is control? How do we get control? Sometimes the ways we go about control kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. Another couple of mistakes. Do your students think you mean it when you give them instructions? So we talk a little bit about that. And then sometimes we use the same thing over and over for a particular instruction. That's some food for thought there. And this is the implementation section. So we have a vision task. There's an unusual left of field task I'm going to get you to do, which could completely change your future. Some tips to follow when you're implementing new strategies. Your implementation report. So for every strategy you implement, I'd like you to write a little short paragraph on how it went. And it's really fantastic to read other people's implementations. And then this is just sort of the wind up, some feedback, a bit of a recap, a little classroom management by default thing, a resources page, and then tell me you're finished. This is just notes for me. So that's basically what the course is. So that should give you a very good view of what is in it. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of that. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask below or by email. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.